All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're heading down to Argentina, Bahia Blanca to be exact. And it's a heavy one. This is about Brian Verna, who was shot and killed, tragically, by his own grandfather, Domingo Verna. The verdict in this case just came out, and we're going to break it all down. We've got an article from the Argentinian news site TNN, and they've got an interview with the mother, Mariel. And honestly, it's a story that just brings up a lot of questions.
Yeah, the verdict itself is pretty unique. It's not a straightforward murder charge. Domingo Vana was actually found guilty of excess in legitimate defense. To really get what that means, we need to kind of look at like the Argentinian legal system.
It's complicated, right? It's like we're not just looking at a crime here, but all this other stuff surrounding it,
Yeah.
legally and emotionally. So what exactly does that excess in legitimate defense actually mean?
So basically, the court said, yeah, Domingo, he was defending himself. But they think he went too far. It's like, think of levels of force. You've got like the bare minimum, just enough to stop an attack. And then way over there is lethal force. Excess in legitimate defense means the court thinks Domingo was somewhere in between. Defending himself, yeah, but his reaction, it didn't match the threat.
Okay, I get it. But 5 shots.
Yeah.
Mariel, Brian's mother, she's saying this is premeditated, this isn't self-defense at all. And she describes Domingo as, well, pretty scary, ex-military, really strict, and violent, physically abusive to both her and Brian. She even mentions a fusta, that's a riding crop. He used it for beatings.
That's really disturbing. It definitely adds another layer to this whole thing. Legally, a history of violence like that, it's important. It could help figure out if a self-defense claim is actually true. And psychologically, if we understand how an abuser acts, maybe we can understand what they might do, their motives.
So this isn't just a one-time thing, right? We're talking about a pattern, possibly, a history of violence that maybe ended up causing this tragedy. To understand that history, we need to rewind a bit. Mariel says she didn't talk to her parents for 12 years.
And that's important. Why? Mariel became a single mother, and her parents saw that as shameful, disgraceful even. And it seems like this disapproval, it went towards Brian too. Mariel says he was constantly teased about looking like his father who wasn't around.
So there's this deep family conflict, maybe some resentment building up for years. Makes you think, could this have led to what happened that day?
Absolutely. When we're looking at something like this, we have to consider things like feuds that have been going on for a long time, unspoken resentment, unresolved conflicts, like a pressure cooker, all these emotions building and building, and then boom, the smallest thing can set it off, a devastating explosion.
And speaking of triggers, Mariel insists, absolutely insists, that Brian, while he did have mental health issues, he wasn't on drugs at the time of the altercation. She uses the word ira. That's intense anger, like wrath. He went to his grandfather's house, and they got into a fight.
That makes us think about Brian's mental state, right? And did that have anything to do with what happened? Was he having an episode that might have affected how he acted? Even without drugs, really strong emotions can lead to impulsive choices, sometimes tragic ones.
Oh, and this is wild. Brian's girlfriend, she was there during the fight, tried to get in the middle of it, but fell. And get this, all of it, the whole argument, the shots, everything, it was caught on camera, surveillance footage.
That footage is key. It could back up what either side is saying or maybe contradict it. Forensic experts, they can look at that video and see what happened. Did Brian pose a real threat? Was Domingo's reaction actually proportionate?
So even though the court said Domingo used too much force, maybe the video will tell us more about what he was thinking. Was it planned? Or was it something that just happened in the heat of the moment? Years of family issues bubbling over. Who knows?
That video, it's like the missing piece, right? We don't have it, so we have to try and figure out what happened from what people are saying and what the court decided.
And they did find Domingo guilty of using too much force. But they didn't say if they thought it was premeditated or not. You said before that the court's job is to look at the evidence and the law, not necessarily someone's intent.
Yeah, think of it like this. The law is about what actually happened, but intent, that's the why, the reason behind it. Proving intent, that's like trying to get inside someone's head. It's way harder to prove.
So even if the court thought, hey, maybe Domingo had other reasons, they probably didn't have enough proof to say for sure it was planned. But Mariel, she believes he wanted to kill Brian. She keeps going back to the 5 shots, especially because they're all in vital areas. To her, that's proof.
It's completely understandable how she feels. I mean, to her, those 5 shots, they weren't just a reaction, they were a choice. It's a tough situation. What the law says happened and what the family feels, those two things don't always match up.
And it makes you think, what is reasonable force? What is it okay to use deadly force? And especially with a family member, maybe someone who has mental health issues.
It's the big question, isn't it? What's reasonable? It's not always clear. The law looks at a few things, like how much danger was there? Was there an immediate threat? Were there other options?
So let's say the video shows Braian. He doesn't have a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't like an immediate threat to Domingo's life. 5 shots could seem like a lot. It's almost like the court is saying, okay, you could defend yourself, but this was too much.
Exactly. You got to find that balance, protecting yourself but not going overboard.
It's hard not to think about Mariel and how she must be feeling, losing her son so violently and then by her own father. That's a lot to carry.
It's just heartbreaking. In this whole case, it shows how complicated families can be and what can happen when things go too far.
There's something in the article that stood out to me. It says Domingo is estranged from his other grandkids too. 7 of them. That's a lot of estrangement. Makes you wonder, was there something else going on?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
It's like we found a loose thread, and if we pull it, maybe a whole bunch of family stuff will unravel. Why was he estranged from all those grandkids? Was there a reason, something he did that caused all of that? Those questions, they could help us understand what happened to Braian.
It's like we're detectives putting a puzzle together. We've got the court's decision, what the mother thinks, and now this whole thing with the grandkids.
Yeah.
But without that video, it's hard to know the whole story.
Yeah, and that's what these deep dives are like, right? We try to figure out what happened, look at all the information, and see if we can find the truth. Sometimes we get answers. Sometimes we end up with more questions than we started with.
But maybe that's the point. It makes us really think, try to figure out these complicated things, and maybe not settle for simple answers.
For sure. It's like we're training our brains, learning how to deal with a world that isn't always black and white. In this case, it's a perfect example. There's no easy answer, no one truth that explains everything.
So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with one last thing to think about. And it goes back to that question we've been talking about. What does justice mean to you? Not just in this case, but in general.
Is justice about punishment? Is it about helping people change? Or is it something else? How do we figure out what's right when there are so many different opinions and things are so messy?
This deep dive, it was just a little window into this whole tragic story. We encourage you to do some more digging, figure out what you think, and maybe have some of those tough conversations about justice, about family, about the choices we make.
Because that's what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
Getting curious, questioning things, and thinking a little harder about the world around us.
Yeah. It stays with you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That question. Was justice served? I mean, legally, we have the verdict. But this case, there's so much gray area. The law can't always capture everything.
Right. And justice, well, it means different things to different people, you know? It's not the same for everyone. It depends on what you've been through, what you believe, how you see people in general.
Like for Mariel, for her,
Yeah.
maybe justice means proving that her father meant to hurt Braian. But the court, they have these rules, these legal standards. They might not be able to do that.
It's that clash you see a lot. What feels right, what your heart tells you, versus what you can actually prove in court. And us, looking in from the outside, we just have these pieces. The court's decision, how Mariel's feeling, and all those unanswered questions about Domingo, you know. What was he thinking? What did he do in the past?
You said before, sometimes these deep dives, they leave us with more questions than answers. Maybe that's not a bad thing.
No, not at all. It makes us think harder, wrestle with these issues, and not just accept the easy answers.
It's like exercise, right?
Mm.
For our brains. We're learning how to deal with a world that isn't simple, a world that isn't always clear-cut. This case, it's like the poster child for that. There's no easy answer, no one truth that explains everything.
Exactly.
So, as we wrap this up, we want to leave you with something to think about. It's that question we keep coming back to. What is justice to you? And not just in this case, but in general.
Do you think justice means punishing someone? Or helping them to change? Is it something else entirely? How do we deal with all these different opinions and these messy situations and find a way to move forward?
We just want to give you a glimpse into this story. It's complicated and it's sad. If you want to learn more, go for it. Do some digging, see what you think, and maybe talk to someone about it, about justice, about family, about the choices people make.
Yeah, these deep dives, it's about getting you curious, making you question things, and think a little deeper about the world, you know? Thanks for listening.